Welcome back to the Talking Archive once again. My name is Josh Jacobs, and our guest today is a former NBC Page, as well as an Emmy-nominated head writer, and she's the author of a new book titled My Peacock Tale, Secrets of an NBC Page. Shelley Herman, thanks for being with us today.
Well, I have so been looking forward to this. I mean, should we tell people that we've actually met before?
Well, that's okay, yeah. Or maybe not, I don't know.
Well, but you have a distinct advantage over other people who've interviewed me because we've actually met.
That's right. We met about 5 or 6 years ago. Adam Nediff, the author of about a dozen game show books, was debuting his game show book on Alan Ludden, titled It's More Than Password, The Life and Wife of Alan Ludden. And I remember we had a bunch of great pictures there. You were there. And Bob Bowden, the former Game Show Network executive, I forget what his job was there, but he was like the head of Game Show Network for many years, and now he's doing his own game shows. And I remember you and Bob were teamed up because we did a password tournament, and you and Bob actually won the tournament outright.
Yeah, that was quite exciting. That we beat all the young'uns that were there. and I should say that both Adam Nediff and Bob Bowden, along with me in a very much smaller capacity, are working diligently to establish the National Archive of Game Show History. And that's going to be housed, of all places, Rochester, New York, at a beautiful facility named the Strong Museum. And why Rochester? This museum, even before our space opens, it's so fascinating, and anybody that's into games would love to go there because it has every game your parents threw away when you moved out of the house. And they've even upped it to have video games there now. And it's a fabulous facility, and it's one of those, like, don't say I'm going to go for 2 hours, say you're going to go for 2 days. It's one of those places.
Wow.
So we're all working real hard to gather game show memorabilia for the museum.
And you've got some memorabilia yourself. Tell us about what your contribution is, along with Adam and Bob's.
To the museum?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the main thing I'm going to be donating is my NBC Page uniform. That's something that originally, and I haven't told anybody else this on a podcast before, but a few years ago, Fred Wasbrock, the late Fred Wasbrock, along with David Michaels and Alex Trebek, they were trying to set up something at the Smithsonian to honor daytime television. And Susan Lucci had donated her Emmy dress. That was like one of the big highlights. Fred Wasbrock had got a lot of game show memorabilia. And then just due to the circumstances we all know about now, that didn't happen. So my uniform was going to go there. So now I have a place, and I even feel better about it being at the Strong Museum because the people that are really into television are going to enjoy seeing all the exhibits that they have there. And as I've said before, there's a lot of wives that are very happy that they're going to get their garages back because their husbands have been hoarding things for years that they have taken from the sets, shall we say.
Well, I've seen pictures of Bob Bowden's living room and garage and maybe even some storage rooms, and he's got all these game show sets there. I'm like, what? It's not what does he own, what doesn't he own?
Yeah, and it's so funny, too, because in putting the word out there, excuse me, I'm going to cough. In putting the word out there that we're looking for items, somebody called me and said, a friend of mine in Las Vegas has the handle that was used on Joker's Wild to run the big slot machine. Do they even care about that? And I thought Adam and Bob were going to jump out of their skin. Of course they wanted that.
Yeah, in fact, Eileen Edgerton, her dad was Justin Edgerton, or Lefty Edgerton, who was the producer of the CBS version of Joker's Wild. I met Eileen about 2 weeks ago, finally in person, after having talked with her over the last couple of years for my book on Jack Barry. And she gave me and several others who were there some memorabilia, including some slides from Joker's Wild of the categories. And when I looked it up in the Sun, I was like, wow, this is really cool. And she also has the slot machine that her dad got from some Vegas casino that they pulled off the cherries and the oranges and put on categories and jokers to do the demonstration for Fred Silverman. So it's
cool.
Just, I mean, there's so much out there, and I think it's better at their own museum than the Smithsonian because it's easy to get daytime television kind of meshed up with soap operas and game shows, and it's always a train wreck.
Also, the Smithsonian only has things that are on display for a limited time. And at the Strong, there's going to be items that are going to be there permanently. And if we get the kind of response we anticipate, we might actually be having part of this exhibit travel around the country.
Wow.
So if she's looking to unload a slot machine, have her give me a call because they would love something like that.
I definitely will put you in contact with her. She's a great gal. She and her dad, Lefty, was just, the guy was a genius. I mean, I think he was just a valuable asset to Jack Berry Productions that a lot of people don't know about, but the book will hopefully get people to know more about Lefty Edgerton. And I'm looking forward to that museum, that game museum there. Adam has a bunch of pictures, and wow, it's just, I can't wait to go.
Oh, it's really going to be something. I mean, I know a little bit of what's going on there, and it's like your childhood is going to come alive in certain areas. It's really cool.
Yeah, bring the tissues, folks. You'll be shedding tears of joy, I think, when you see all that. I've just seen a little bit of it myself. I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, save your money for airfare because the opening is going to be fabulous.
All right. And Shelley, tell us about yourself growing up and how you got into being in show business.
Well, I was really lucky, and so many people say that about whatever good jobs they get, but I lived out in Agoura, California, and at the time it was a very rural area, and I like to say we were kind of free-range students back in the day, and somebody had scored some tickets to go see the Midnight Special, which was a late-night rock concert show. It was on Friday nights on NBC. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, and I remember the day I was there, we saw Gladys Knight and the Pips, B.B. King, and Jim Croce. And because they had people sit on the ground on pillows like little hippies, I remember I purposely wore this big white hat because I thought if they do a long shot and they see the audience, I'll be able to see myself in the audience. So, and I found that I did a still grab of that. I found it online, so I do have that picture of little 17-year-old Shelley's hat. So while I was there, I realized that there were these people standing around wearing these hideous polyester uniforms who were getting paid to sit and listen to rock and roll music all day, and those were the NBC Pages. And the only job I'd had up until then was volunteering at a local theater here where I would escort the celebrities to their seats, and Jack Benny and George Burns were two of them, so it was like the VIP aisle.
Wow.
I got that. So I thought that's all I would really need to get that job because I could seat people. But little did I know that it's one of the most coveted entry-level jobs in the entertainment industry. And through some, it's a longer story, but I detail it in My Peacock Tale about I befriended a girl who was kind of like a wallflower kind of girl. And it was a weekend we went to see Elvis. So it's a fun story. Mm-hmm. And when I was telling her my hopes and dreams, she mentioned that her mother's best friend worked at NBC and maybe she could put in a good word for me. And that's how I got my interview and eventually got the job.
That's great. And you came from Philadelphia originally. How did you make the trek from Philly all the way to Agoura Hills?
Well, and at the time, this is how old I am. It wasn't even Agoura Hills back there. It was just Agoura. My family moved west back in the late 50s. And in fact, there's a wonderful story my parents used to tell about. They had gone to Las Vegas back when that was still, a one-horse town. And they were on their way into the casino at like 6 a.m. Out came Frank Sinatra. And my dad, who's always been like kind of a schmoozer guy, he was a bartender, so he could talk up people. And he went over to Frank and, said how much he liked him and everything, and said, yeah, we're going to come to your show tonight. And Frank said, oh, you got tickets? And my dad went, tickets? And Frank comped my mom and dad at the Sands Hotel and sat them at a table with this young senator named John Kennedy.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty darn cool, huh?
Yeah. And then a couple of years later, maybe a year or two later, he ran for president and won.
Yep. And the rest has been history, yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes being in the right place at the right time really matters.
Sure does. And wow, I remember, hearing about Sinatra in Vegas, and you've got some great stories about Sinatra, including one that was Sadie O'Sullivan. She was somebody that you talked about hanging out. She married an Irish guy, and the marriage quickly faded or fizzled, even though she was Jewish, but she kept the name Sadie O'Sullivan. It has a nice alliteration to it. And she one time went to the Sportsman's Lodge and hit a Nazi with her handbag and got arrested. And Frank Sinatra, well, tell us that story.
Well, first of all, I love that you read the book. This is fabulous. There used to be a woman that used to come to all the TV shows. You might have heard of her, Miss Miller. Mm-hmm. And she eventually wasn't allowed on camera because they made her join the performing union and they'd have to pay her each time she was on camera. But NBC had Sadie O'Sullivan, and Red Fox looked at her as his good luck charm. And the people at Hollywood Squares just loved her also. So Sadie had seen some commotion over at The Tonight Show, which was across from where Sanford and Son was being taped. And she asked me what was going on, and I said, oh, Frank Sinatra's next door at The Tonight Show. And she said, he bailed me out of jail once. And she proceeded to tell me the story of how she hit a Nazi with her purse. She got thrown in jail, and as she's being processed, they said, okay, Sadie, you're released, your bail's been posted. And she says, nobody knows I'm here. And sure enough, Frank Sinatra had gotten wind of it and wrote her a telegram that said, way to go, Sadie, love Francis Albert. So she said, I never had the opportunity to thank Frank for getting me out of the pokey. So one of the things you have to understand about Red Fox is he was treated like a Fabergé egg, and none of us were supposed to talk to him, but I couldn't resist because I knew how much he adored Sadie. So just before they're getting ready to tape, I knock on his dressing room door, and he opens up the door, and I know he wasn't expecting to see me. And I looked at him, and I said, do you like Frank Sinatra? And he goes, yeah. And I said, does he like you? Yeah. So I told him the Sadie story. He held up taping of Sanford and Son and took her over to The Tonight Show so she could thank Frank herself in person.
That's great.
Yeah. That's the kind of stuff we used to do. I mean, unlike the Universal Studios tour, our tour was within the four walls of a genuine working facility. Mm-hmm. So at any given moment, the door could open up, and it could be John Wayne, it could be Jimmy Stewart, it could be Johnny Carson, it could be 9 people that were going to lunch after Hollywood Squares. I mean, it was really an exciting place to be at the time I was there.
I took the tour for the first time with my day camp back in the summer of 1979. I was 7 years old. Now people know my age, and it was a fun time. I remember seeing one piece of the Card Sharks set in one section of the big warehouse in the center of the studio, and then another in the other part. I also remember seeing Password Plus. They showed us the studio where High Rollers was about to tape. They didn't show us Hollywood Squares. They did say, okay, this is the studio where the Squares is taped, but they didn't actually take us in to show us the 3-story tall tic-tac-toe board. And I remember asking the Page, what about the Password Plus? Are the questions right there, right now, even as we speak? She says, no, actually what we do is we wait till the set's assembled, put in the studio, then we put the questions in there. So she was really cool about it, for me asking such a silly question. But it was cool just looking at that. And then about 10 years later, took the tour again and saw the set to Scrabble, and the Page said, yeah, that set cost $100,000, and my jaw just dropped. But today it would probably be $1 million. But it was a fun event. And then the first time, I remember they said, Johnny Carson's here, and that was the first time I ever heard the name Johnny Carson, I'll confess. And I said to my day camp counselor, where's Johnny Carson? He's like, you just missed him. Of course, if I'd seen him, I probably wouldn't have known who he was anyway. So, looking back, it's like, darn, I wish I'd seen Johnny.
Well, what was your impression of seeing the sets in the hallway, without the lights on them and disassembled? What did you think when you saw them?
It looked weird. They looked much cheaper. On television, they looked so glamorous and glitzy. Kind of like when I tried out for the game show Triple Threat in 1988. It was created by Sam Riddle, who was on 93 KHJ here in Los Angeles, as well as Carolyn.
Star Search. He produced Star Search, yeah.
And it was filmed at the what was then called the Aquarius Theater, where Star Search was made. And the set looked really just kind of drab in person, but then when we saw one of the episodes, which Jim Lang hosted, it was like, wow, it looks so much better on television. And I didn't realize it was like paper covering over those popcorn lights for the scoring. I thought it was maybe some, like, I don't know, material like a cloth or a polyester material. I didn't realize it was paper.
Some space age technology that went into doing the game show.
Or maybe a golden Brillo pad that they stretched out.
Well, and I was there when they first started introducing computers. Ooh, and boy, did that mess a lot of tapings up, because they tried to use them to run the chaser lights on things and to make the scoreboards move and stuff, and whoever Earl was and Slide It Earl, he had the right formula to make a game show work on Match Game. It was very simple. It didn't hold up people's time, and they got it done.
Yeah, in fact, it was interesting you mentioned the guy who pulled the peacock curtain on the set of The Tonight Show. I didn't realize it was called that for years. I just called it the rainbow curtains. And I thought maybe there was some sort of mechanical thing that the board operator behind this console pushed for the curtain to move for Johnny to come in. I didn't realize it was an actual person pulling that curtain for Johnny to come through.
Yep, his name was Irv, and he would fist bump Johnny every night before going out.
Wow. So instead of Slide It Earl, like, pull it, Irv. Or something like that.
Exactly. And also there was an incident once, and I wasn't at Page at this time, because when we, a lot of people go, oh, you must have watched a lot of Tonight shows while you were there. Kind of no, because our job was to have our backs to the show, and we were supposed to be looking up at the audience the whole time to make sure somebody wasn't going to, try to, threaten Johnny in any way. And a couple years after I left, there was an incident where somebody did run from the audience and run onto the stage. And Irv, along with Kevin Quinn's son, tackled the guy and kept him from getting to Johnny. It turned out he just wanted a handshake. But nevertheless, people are admonished, as you know, going to the different shows, you're not supposed to leave the audience section without being escorted by one of the pages, and certainly not brush the stage.
Exactly. So, I mean, I remember you mentioned different secret hiding places or passages that Johnny would go through sometimes to leave the studio, especially with crazed fans or just crazed people in general who are stalking celebrities. I don't blame them for having something like that. I think I remember reading.
Well, Johnny was at one point it seemed like it was a great idea to put a very large picture window that looked out on Alameda Avenue. Mm-hmm. We were at 3000 West Alameda Avenue. And even to the point that Red Fox got a little bit envious of that, and he wanted a large window also in his office. And he had like a little bit of a sick-in until he got his window. But as things became a little bit more security conscious at NBC, they then moved Johnny's offices from that room down to the basement, which used to be the Page Lounge. We called it the Subterranean Lounge. And there was a secret tunnel that if they needed an escape room for Johnny, that he could go out through this secret tunnel underneath what they called the midway area, where Johnny would pull up with his car and park his car in that area. And they could take him out through the administration building. And actually, that's the way he left the final Tonight Show. He did not greet people after the show. He went through this special tunnel, out the administration building, onto the very back area of the NBC lot, and took a helicopter away from NBC, and he had a big party that he'd had at his house that was an invitation-only event for all of his staff who'd worked the Tonight Show. Les Brown and the Band of Renown played, and it was quite the party at his home.
This is the Talking Archive. I'm Josh Jacobs, and our guest is Shelley Herman. She's talking about her new book called My Peacock Tale, Secrets of an NBC Page. If you'd like to purchase the book, just go to her website at mypeacocktale.com. That's mypeacocktale.com. Next time, she talks about more stories on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, as well as getting to work the Emmy Awards at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium.